30. It's January 16, 2024. This is Committee of the Whole. Welcome everyone here. I'm Pam Cotter, District 2. To my right is Paul Pickett, District 1. Rosalba Dominguez, District number 3, will be here shortly. We have Councilwoman Diane Turner, District 4, and Adam Hawk, District number 5. Thank you for being here. And we have the mayor and Jennifer. Thank you. So first thing we need to do, there are no minutes, so we will go right on to the first discussion item. Intermountain Power Agency Legislative Update, Greg Ballon and Rob Hughes.
Thank you, Council. Thanks for having us today. I think we're going to learn some pretty interesting things today. Bottom's here as well. Hughes, President IPA. Let's turn the time over to Rob and just let him start presentation for it. So we ask questions, but I think you'll find it very interesting. Some of them were, I think you were at the interim meeting as well. So this will be a good review, hopefully. So Rob, will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Need to join and talk.
Here,
Would you come up here because we
sit right here and
Cheryl, stay with us.
take that and I'll go get that.
Thanks, Jennifer. And speak Nipson.
I'll try.
Well, thank you for having me. My name is Rob Hughes. I'm with the from Parsons Bailey Lab. Eric Lawden here is with Holland and Hart, and together we represent Intermountain Power Agency, and that gets complicated how we work together, but we work together great. I hope you'll see. We came to talk to you about something that's important to IPA and thereby we think should be important to Murray City, and it has to do with some of the legislative risks and threats that we're facing this year. So I'll just get right into it. And we'll start with the basics. Murray City's been part of IPA for 40 years, but if it doesn't come up week after week, you might not know a lot about it. So we figured we'd start with the very basics. So IPA, Intermountain Power Agency, is an interlocal entity. That is a type of entity you might be familiar with Unified Fire, Unified Police. It's what cities do when they want to band together and do a project together, and they can form a separate legal entity. Importantly, interlocal entities don't require any state funding. They don't require the state to give you a license. It's sort of like if you wanted to start an LLC, you go, there's the Division of Corporations, you just go do it. They set forth a corporations code and then people can organize themselves into a corporation. Likewise, cities can organize themselves into interlocal entities, and that's what IPA is. There are 23 municipal members of IPA, of which Murray is one, and then there are 35 power purchasers. So each of the 23 cities is a power purchaser, but there's also customers, 6 in California, and then 6 rural cooperatives. Now IPP, and you'll hear people use IPA and IPP interchangeably, and that's forgivable. But they are different. IPP is the project, Intermountain Power Project. It's the physical plant, the facility. Principally, what you're talking about is an 1,800 megawatt coal-fired power plant just located right outside of Delta. But there's also a northern transmission system that brings power up into the Rocky Mountain Service Territory, which is how Murray gets its power. And then, of course, there's a DC transmission line that goes all the way to California. So those 3 components together make up the IPP. It's important to note that this is funded by bonds issued by IPA and backed by the power sales contracts. So it's the city's credit that underlies the issuance of these bonds. There's never been any state funding involved in it. There's no taxpayer funding in it. It's ratepayer funding. It's your municipal ratepayers pay their bills, and that's what backs these bonds. And importantly, IPA owns IPP. It's that simple. IPA owns IPP. Here you can see this is a page from the original interlocal agreement. It goes back to the 1970s. For some reason, there's 22 cities on there. I counted today, but there are 23 actual cities. I must have clipped it wrong. But anyway, you see Murray's there along with Mount Pleasant and Oak City, but other bigger cities like Bountiful and Price, Kaysville. But Murray is one of the biggest. And you'll see here, so IPA has power sales contracts with each of the 35 purchasers. So again, that's all 323 Utah cities, and then the 6 California cities, the 6 rural co-ops. The power sales contracts are what we call take or pay contracts, which is a common formation in infrastructure where you've got a big upfront cost that has to get paid back regardless. And so what it means is you either take the service and pay for it, or you pay for it anyway, right? And that's the fundamental nature of infrastructure projects, because they're so expensive that whether you take the energy or not, you still have to pay the cost of building the plant. That's standard in infrastructure projects. However, IPA presents a much better deal for the Utah municipal purchasers. Because what it allows is for each of the Utah cities to lay off their power, and the California cities have to buy it. And so it comes in seasonal increments, 6 month increments. Every 6 months, Greg gets to decide how much he wants to call back or lay off. If you lay off all that power, there is no cost to Murray City. Only when you take the power back. So we think of it as kind of on the shelf power for the Utah cities. It's there, it doesn't cost anything until you want to take it back. And here you can see kind of, you should note that Murray City is the biggest Utah municipal member, 4%, 72 megawatts, which is a pretty big slug of power for Murray City. And the fact is, most of the time, I think, it's more economical for the city to lay those megawatts off. But from time to time, depending on what's happening in the power markets, it's a really nice thing to have to call that power back. We are in the middle of what we call IPP Renewed. And I think I skipped a slide there, but we'll work with it. IPP Renewed is a project to build new natural gas units that are about half the size of the coal units. That also requires decommissioning and retiring the coal units. And then we've got a transmission project. It's a massive transition project that's really for the California members. And then there's a hydrogen project that's involved. And we've been on this path for a long time. Back in 2012, we had to go to the state legislature and get some technical changes to allow this, what we call replacement project capacity. That's the natural gas units. In 2015, we amended the power sales contracts, and then in 2017 entered into new contracts. So Murray City is under contract through 2077 with this project, and with the basis of that being not the 1,800 megawatt gas units, but pretty soon it'll be 840 megawatts of, excuse me, I said gas, not 1,800 megawatts of coal, but 840 megawatts of gas. And I put all these things on the timeline just to show how long we've been working on this, and frankly, how committed we are. And when I say we, I really mean we, because the cities are committed. And if you add up all the construction contracts, it's over $4 billion now. If you add in the long-term agreements with the gas provider and the hydrogen provider, that's another $3.5 billion over the next 30 years. So it's a huge commitment that we're right in the middle of. That picture is actually maybe 3 or 4 months out of date. Right now, behind that crane, you'd see the new gas units coming out of the ground. So we're on schedule to have those gas units first fire. I think it's in August of this year. So it's an exciting year. We've got a lot going on.
So we really started in 2012, changing over.
Absolutely. And the history of it, and frankly, it goes before my time with the project, but there was legislation in California which made it impossible for the California cities to take coal power after a certain date. And so the California cities, the reason why you've got such a good deal, this on-the-shelf power, is because you've got these other cities with a huge appetite for power. And so their attitude is, anytime you don't want it, we'll take it, right? But when those huge customers, I mean, Los Angeles by itself holds about a 48% share compared to your 4%. When your biggest customer says, we can't take your product anymore, you gotta find another way. And so we had to go to the legislature and get permission, and it wasn't specific as to coal or gas, but just permission to create what we call a replacement project capacity, to replace the capacity that was there. So yes, in answer to your question, since 2012, we've been going down this road. And it's been pretty open where we were headed.
So when is it just now being scrutinized? I don't understand.
So
I was there in 2012, and we did clearly say
Yeah.
this was about transitioning from coal to gas. Everybody knew that.
think of a a late night Tuesday city council meeting when you've got a bunch of residents who are upset about something that you've been working on for a long time, but they just heard about it, right? I mean, I think that's kind of what's happened, is that there are legislators in the House and Senate now who weren't around in 2012. And we're not up there every year giving them an update. I mean, actually, that we do give them updates. But if you haven't been paying attention to it and you just find out that, wait a minute, this big coal plant's going away, that causes concern for people.
Yeah.
And it's a good segue to this slide, which is the coal units. This is what the concern is about. So you'll hear a lot of talk about this term coal units. A unit is the boiler and the generator together. And you see those two buildings just in front of the stack there. That's unit 1 and unit 2. Those are the coal units. And they are 18-story tall concrete boilers. They're massive. The coal gets pulverized to the about the size of baby powder and then injected in and combusted. It's really pretty cool to go down and see how it works. But I bring this up because I asked at one point, and a lot of people ask, well, gosh, if they want the coal units, can we sell them? Can we move them somewhere else? Didn't they move Geneva Steel to China? The answer is no. They're concrete, they're rebar, they really can't be moved. But that's, when people talk about the coal units, it's those two huge buildings in the background is what they're talking about. And they must be retired. And this is just a sad reality, but they have to be retired. First reason is our Clean Air Act permit. If you want to build a new gas plant these days and you don't have something to trade, like shutting down a coal unit, you go through major source permitting, which takes a decade if everything goes well. But our plan was always to build the coal unit or build the gas units and take the coal units down. So you get the benefit from an emissions perspective of that netting out. Well, we will emit far less with small gas units than these two huge coal units. So it made for a relatively easy, I won't say easy, but a relatively easy permitting process. But that commitment to bring the coal units down is baked into the permit. It says right there, they shall cease operations and be removed from service. This is the construction permit that we're operating under right now. It's also our operating permit. And so if those coal units don't come down, we're in violation. So
And
they
is
need
that
to come
with the
down.
EPA?
Yes.
So that's at the federal level?
Yeah, and it's a good question because you'll hear a lot of people who I think mean well but maybe don't understand how complicated it is. They'll say, well, the state DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, or the Division of Air Quality, they're the ones who issue your permit, and that's true. But they issue it pursuant to the EPA, to the Federal Clean Air Act. And so the way I like to say it is, the DEQ implements the Clean Air Act, they can't amend it. They can't ignore it. They have to follow it. And so there's been discussion, and we'll get into this, about, well, maybe the legislature could just tell DEQ what to do. Well, that would work for maybe a minute until EPA gets wind of it and says, no, that's not gonna work. You look like you're about to ask a question.
I mean, I'm just looking at, I was thinking about the slate of bills that are up at the Hill, right? And one of them is to eliminate the relationship with the feds. And
The sovereignty bill.
yeah, the sovereignty bill and how it that could eliminate this whole contract. I don't know if that's their long-term goal, or if it's an overreach, or how that would put us into.
So luckily that
As a
bill,
city.
from what I understand, isn't aimed directly at this issue. It's more sort of broadly, let's thumb our nose at the federal government. Whether that will work or not, I'm not.
Right, but it could potentially affect and then have a trickle down effect even to cities.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
It's one of,
I'm just thinking as an overall reach where they have been in the last session, it seems like they're really just targeting this project specifically and.
yeah, frankly, it was kind of nice to see a bill that targeted everybody instead of one that was just aimed. But yeah, because a bill like that, hopefully a lot of people will voice concern, and who knows where that bill will go. Unfortunately, we do have some more targeted bills
Yeah,
that we're looking at.
okay.
Second reason the coal plant has to come down is, again, the Clean Air Act, Part 2. There's what's called this, so the state has all these state implementation plans to implement the Clean Air Act. One of them is called the Regional Haze SIP, State Implementation Plan. This is one that's focused on haze at national parks and whatnot. And so it doesn't focus on every emission source, but a handful, I'd say 8 or 10 of the biggest emission sources. And it requires, the federal rule or the state's plan requires that haze to come down gradually over time. Well, because these coal units have been slated for decommissioning for a decade or more, the state, in developing its regional haze plan, has counted on the IPP units coming down because that delays the pollution controls on all these other emitters, right? So think Rocky Mountain Power, they've got 2 coal plants. You've got Kennecott, US Mag, all these big emitters, they're all counting on these 2 IPP coal units being retired because it allows them to maintain their emissions levels longer. So the state's own SIP requires us to permanently close and cease operation of Units 1 and Unit 2. The state is so invested in this that just a month ago, or I guess now it's 2 months ago, in November, they filed a lawsuit against the EPA, not to get out from under this, but to force EPA to adopt this SIP because the EPA has been sitting on it for over a year. So when you talk about state government and left hands and right hands not knowing what the other one's doing, the administration, DAQ, needs this SIP to stay in place. All those other emitters need it to stay in place, but you've got some legislators who want to unwind it. The third reason that we need to retire the coal units, CCRs, coal combustion residuals. So you burn coal, you create a bunch of fly ash, bottom ash, sludge. That all gets put into a slurry, piped out into these big evaporation ponds. And that's been okay for 40 years. But in the last, I guess since 2015, new rules have come in that said, for these unlined ponds, you've got to take them out of service by 2021. Well, as you've noticed, it's not 2021, it's 2024. So we're operating under an exception. The exception in that rule that came out in 2015 was you don't have to close your ponds now or reline them now if you're already planning to shut down your coal units. So we took advantage of this. We didn't spend hundreds of millions of dollars or tens of millions installing a new dry handling system or lining these ponds. We took advantage of the exception. So we've been on this path for years now where we said, please let us continue with the current impoundments because we're planning to shut them down. So if the state forces us to change course, we're concerned that EPA could come in with an enforcement action. We would be immediately in violation and they could force us to shut down in 135 days. So that's reason number 3.
And to your question
Yeah.
about who knew what when, in 2017, when that election was required to be made, notice was given to all state leadership, governor, legislative leaders. There was a press release saying we're having to step away from coal. So if they didn't find out in 2012, they knew in 2017.
Yeah, it was really kind of a point of no return. The final reason I'll mention anyway that we need to retire the coal plants is that the contract says so. So there's 35 contracts that IPA has with the 35 power purchasers. Built right into the contracts is when you're done with the gas repowering, you have to bring the coal units down and retire them. And that's not random that that's in there. It's prudent utility practice is the way we like to put it, because environmental liabilities don't get smaller over time, right? Plumes of groundwater move, regulations get more strict. So we've got environmental problems associated with the CCR impoundments and just the fact that there's been a coal plant there for 40 years that need to be dealt with and remediated. We want to do that now. But as you already know, there's been efforts to preserve the coal units, and it's perfectly understandable why people are concerned. If you're a legislator from a coal community, you know that one of your big customers for your industry is going away, and that's going to cost jobs. And that just is the case, that there will be less demand for coal. I will say as an editorial aside, right now the coal industry is struggling for a whole lot of reasons in Utah that have nothing to do with demand. There's supply problems. You may have seen just last year the Lila Canyon mine. It's one of the biggest coal mines in Utah. caught fire, was closed for a year while they tried to figure out what to do. It's now permanently closed. And so everybody who's got an appetite for coal in Utah is scrambling to get coal. So there's both supply and demand problems. But in any event, just to explain where they're coming from, that's where it comes from. It comes from a good faith concern about jobs in rural Utah. That led in 2023 to HB 425, and it did a couple of things. The first thing it did was prevent us from moving forward with the decommissioning. So you cannot prevent the functionality of the project's coal assets. And that language is a little bit odd, and like all legislation, it came about in an odd manner. But Senator Owens, the sponsor, he clarified what he meant. He went on a radio show and he said they have to leave the plant standing, and when they walk away, because it belongs to the state of Utah, it doesn't have to be eminent domain. Now, as somebody who's worked in municipal law for a long time, that struck me as very odd. I'm sitting here in what appears to be a brand new and beautiful Murray City Hall. The state of Utah didn't pay for it. The state of Utah can't have it. This notion that when you're done with one building and want to walk away from it, that the state has something to say about how you deal with it, I found startling. Right now, we're just delayed. But that delay is costing money. The state, the folks who want to keep these coal units, they want to keep them mothballed so that if they come up with some other ideas later, they can use them again. Okay, but that costs money. You can't just put a fence around it and walk away. The machinery in there has to be lubed, turning things, anything that rotates has to be rotated. Otherwise, you come back in a year and it's all rusted up. So if to follow the spirit of this law, we are going to have to spend some money, which means you're going to have to spend some money. I won't go through all this. HB 425 also called for this continued operation study. They basically said, here's $500,000 to the governor's office of economic development. Go hire somebody to do a study to see if we can keep the coal units operating. And basically give us a roadmap. So they hired a law firm out of Houston, Jackson Walker, to present the roadmap, and that's what they did. It came out in November, and despite it being a roadmap, there's a lot of things interesting in it, I think, that frankly are helpful. They acknowledged the costs attendant to just keeping them running, right? We'd have to retube these boilers because we haven't done that in a few years because we're not going to be using it much longer. Selective catalytic reduction technology for the NOx emissions, $500 million. To deal with the CCR problem, another $80 million. So you add it up, you're talking $1 billion just to keep these units going. And I want to say, the units are in great shape. I mean, the plant has been maintained and operated beautifully, but it's still 35 years old. So it needs some work. The report also identified some challenges. It admitted they don't have a customer for 1,800 megawatts of coal power. Everybody says, oh, we'll get data centers. Data centers don't want coal power. Facebook, Google, they want to be able to tout the fact that they're operating on renewable energy. The report admitted that they don't have any transmission because you own the transmission, right? The transmission lines are all spoken for, so they'd have to build new transmission lines. And they noticed that there's no water rights. To make electricity, you got to make steam. For steam, you got to have water to put in the boilers. They don't have any water. They did identify some potential alternative uses. I will just say that none of these have been done at scale. They tried to put kind of swag numbers on them that came to another $1 billion. The syngas, they couldn't even put a number on. CCUS, carbon capture, maybe someday will work. It might need to be part of the plan. Hasn't been done yet. Coal to graphite hasn't been done anywhere at scale. These are kind of pie in the sky plans, if you ask me. But then it ends with some recommendations. The first recommendation from Jackson Walker was, you got to get control of IPA. At the very least, you have to put them under PSC jurisdiction. Now, hopefully that means something to you, because as a municipal power city, you should understand that there's two models. Rocky Mountain Power gets a monopoly, and in exchange for that monopoly, the Public Service Commission approves or rejects their rates. You guys have your own system. You are the ones who approve and reject the rates. And so this is not an academic thing. This puts municipal bonds at risk, and Eric can speak to that because this has actually almost happened.
Well, the initial bonding for the project back in the early '80s, someone who would be here if we could have him here, an attorney who represents IPA has been there, but he was formerly with the AG's office. He was called down to Governor Matheson's office one day and to a room full of New York attorneys and bond lawyers and underwriters saying, we just found out that your AG's office is asserting that IPA is subject to Public Service Commission jurisdiction. And they said this bond closing that's supposed to happen tomorrow will not happen unless that opinion changes today. And so this, Mark Bushai is the name of the fellow who was with the AG's office. He had to scramble that day and figure out why it wasn't subject to PSC jurisdiction. They figured it out, bond closing went forward, but that's how important it is that there not be PSC jurisdiction over IPA. Otherwise the bondholders are at risk of, at the whim of the PSC as to whether they can get paid back. So
if they were successful in, I mean, could they eliminate it really? I mean, could the
legislature do that? Yeah, they
And
could.
then
Now,
and then we would still be on the hook for those bonds, no matter what.
yes, so we are about 2/3 of the way through. 2 tranches of bonds have gone out, to the tune of what, $1.6 billion? Another tranche next year of about 800 million. So we would be about 2/3 of the way through. It would put at risk that last tranche of bonds, and I don't know what you do if we can't get the money to finish the project.
Right. And has anything like this ever happened even nationally, like historically?
We have looked and looked for examples like this. What I have found is that every state is so unique that every instance that we find that looks like it might be similar, you dig into the details and well, there's an important distinction. So the answer, I have not found a situation quite like this. And the good news is, I think this is so scary that I think even legislators are listening to this.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't want to put a rosy glow on it, but I also don't want to make it too scary. I think there are legislators who matter who've kind of gotten this particular message.
I think they all serve a city of some sort, right, in a
One
county,
would hope,
and so
yeah.
they have an invested interest
Yeah.
in what happens in their own cities too.
It's so much of it is just about education, right? That if someone says, well, gosh, keep those coal units open so we can save some jobs, that seems pretty simple. Why don't you do that? And it's only if people who are willing to invest a few minutes, it doesn't take that long, to understand some of this. I think we're starting to get through, but this is one that we are pretty concerned about. Recommendations 2 and 3 get really into the meat of the matter, which is, as you can see there in that first highlighted, to split the coal-fired generation assets away from IPA. That's the goal. And to transfer those to some new entity governed by the state. That's really what they hope to do. Or let me say it this way, that's what Jackson Walker recommended that they do.
Would you say that again?
The core recommendation from Jackson Walker was to create a new state entity, take the coal assets from IPP and transfer them to that new state entity. Now, importantly, and this goes back to the quote from Senator Owens earlier, if you dig into the Jackson Walker report, they make it clear that that transfer would be without compensation.
Right.
So now, I mean, you're a city council, you probably had to deal with eminent domain, you know how it works. Government can take property, right? But you have to pay for it. And the Jackson Walker report just sort of ignores that, and it says, well, we could do this without paying anything at all. Now, I still don't know why they think that. The municipal attorneys that I've spoken to are 100% in agreement that it's crazy that the state could think it could do that. We've got some case law from the 60s that I think supports us, that even when the state takes property from a school district, they've got to pay for it. And it would, one interpretation is they might think, well, gosh, you're done with them, so why don't you just let us have them, right? Which might make sense if you could move them, right? But you can't move them, And if you take the property, between the coal units themselves, the environmental controls, and the coal yard, we're talking 400 acres of property, right? And it's property right where our water system is, right where the transmission systems are. If there's ever gonna be new units, new generating units, another gas unit, some other type of generation unit, it would go right there. And anyway, so they don't think they have to pay for
And in
that.
relation to the property, where are the caverns?
I will show you that. It is to the south across the street. When we get a different picture that shows that, I'll show you that.
So is the idea then, would they argue that they're trying to separate the coal into the new entity, the coal plants, and the hydrogen would be under IPA?
So the hydrogen is owned, it's not on our property. So IPA you own about 4,000 acres of property on the north side of the highway called Brush-Wellman Road. On the south side of the highway, it's owned by Sitla. Sitla has a lease with a company called ACES, and ACE is a private company that is doing the hydrogen venture. So far, there's been no threat against the hydrogen. And just to be fair, every legislator who talks about this, even those who are really interested in getting their hands on these coal units, they all say they don't want to mess up the IPP Renewed project. And I take them at their word. I worry about unintended consequences. But the hydrogen would be still owned by a private entity. IPA has a services agreement essentially with the hydrogen company to basically give them energy and give back hydrogen. One of the things Jackson Walker recommended was if you don't take the property, maybe you could just take control of IPA, right? You could accomplish the same purpose if you just ran IPA. So they suggested they just dissolve the existing IPA board. I'll note that in their draft report that they issued in September, they admitted that would probably create problems with the contracts clause of the Constitution. Legislation isn't supposed to override contracts, and then they just left that out of their final report, because that was unhelpful.
So short-sighted.
Let's just give you some courage.
Yeah.
See what you do with it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then within days of that report coming out, here was the bill. And now this was a committee bill. This came out in November, and you see right there at the end, governing board of a project entity's IPA, existing before May 1, 2024, is dissolved. So they acted on the recommendation. And elsewhere in this legislation, it replaces that with a new board, still 7 members, but it's 2 members of the House, 2 members of the Senate, 1 appointed by the governor, and you all get to keep 2. But you would lose control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where
Say
the,
something real quick.
oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Can you go back to that? real quick?
I hope so. Let's see.
So, I use this example. So say the administration, Biden administration comes to the state of Utah, comes to our legislators and says, we do not like the way you're running your state. So we're gonna take and we're
Yeah.
gonna get a new entity, or we're gonna appoint 2 members of the House from the federal government, 2 members of the Senate, then they'll be able to pick, and then President Biden will be able to choose whoever he wants, and then we'll give you 2 members, and then we're gonna take over running the state. Do you think the kids would explode? That's what we're trying to avoid here. Murray cities are set up to be self-governed. That's the beauty of the cities, and that's what makes Murray and all the other cities in the state amazing, because they're self-governed, and they're chipping away at that.
There's almost no decision that they shouldn't make, right?
Right, so they say.
Yes. And quickly, I'm over time here, so I'll get through this, but we mentioned before, one of the recommendations was, we'll just pass a statute directing DAQ to change our air permit. Well, we just don't think that works. And the problem is,
I mean,
if they move forward with it and EPA decided to put their foot down, you're talking about construction stopping, right? If they pull our construction permit,
well, what would that do to other industries? Like,
I-
I mean, it would,
I can't even imagine.
yeah.
Avoiding, because there's a process you're supposed to go through to change a permit. Skipping that completely violates the state implementation plan that pursuant to which the state gets to regulate all kinds of emitter.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
so then the EPA comes in and says, well, so much for that state implementation plan, we the feds are gonna come in and run the show. I mean,
Yeah.
we hope that doesn't
There's
happen, but
unintended
that's
consequences.
not a
Yeah.
good result. Not a good result.
What is the number of the bill?
So that bill has thankfully not been numbered yet. So it came out as a committee bill, and then through a lot of efforts from cities like you, I think the message got there, and so it did not pass out of committee. So the way I understand it is if it comes as a committee bill and it gets unanimous, then it goes in as a committee bill and it's got priority. It didn't get that. In fact, I think they didn't even put up for a vote because they knew it wasn't gonna get that. So no one yet has taken that bill and owned it and put a number on it, but we're waiting to
The
see.
people are proud.
So we don't need to go through this necessarily, but I think you understand the impacts the potential impacts to Murray City. I will say that, when we first put this presentation together and started doing it in November, it was kind of hair on fire, mode. Since then, I do think, I don't want to be too optimistic, but I do feel like we've gotten the ear of some important legislators, some sane people who understand that these problems are real. We're not making them up, and so the atmosphere seems more positive. But we learned last year that it takes all 45 days, right?
Yeah.
And that HB 425, I mean, we were 43 days into the session last year and thought, okay, this might go okay. And a senator got angry on the 43rd day or 44th day, and we got that HB 425. So we really need to maintain vigilance. This is kind of the ask, is not necessarily to run up the SOS flag right now, but to stand by and be vigilant with us, because there will come a day probably where we're gonna need the city to use its voice and express, to me, there are so many assaults from the state on municipal prerogatives. And you see it in land use and zoning is where I usually see it. But this one is beyond the pale. I mean, the idea that the state could simply say, hey, Unified Fire, that platform truck you just spent $1 million on, we think that's better served by the state owning it. It just, I find galling. And we're not out of the woods yet. So anyway, I've taken more time than we should have, so I'll
You're
stop
fine.
there.
This was a good discussion.
You're fine.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah,
we find
that's really
another
helpful.
person besides this Jackson Walker people and do a report?
You should write your legislative.
It's a good question, because one of the things that legislators are talking about is, well, maybe we need another study. See what, if anything, really can be done with, is there an appetite for 1,800 megawatts?
They look at this report while they're doing another report.
Well, the
But they-
concern is who you get to do the report, right?
Somebody from Houston doesn't have perspective on municipal
Go
power
Yeah,
and what we're doing.
well,
Yeah.
the
You can
argument.
pay anybody to say what you want.
If you go back to that slide I had that listed all the things in that legislation, the legislators were asking for a report that told them what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
Right? And then they put it on an RFP that doubled down on that, and so then you get a firm that wants to tell you what you want to hear. So it's this big echo chamber. And so when they say this year, well, maybe we should do another report, on the one hand I think, well, maybe that could be good if if it's objective, but if it just doubles down with this kind of predetermined answer, maybe it makes things worse.
Yeah, they need to start looking forward and doing some cross-training and, realizing that
So, I'm sorry.
there are things that they can do and really they can put people to work in other areas as well. So, I mean, that's what they need to be looking at, but they're not at this point. Maybe they will.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you
you.
very much. I really appreciate your time.
Do you have anything that you want to bring in?
I just want to thank Rob and Eric. So you all probably know way more than the legislature has learned about this. Because at the interim committee we were at, they were
Yes.
throwing out UAMPS, they were throwing out IPA, they were throwing out IPP.
Yeah.
They were so confused.
Yeah.
And right there, you had us explain to you in a way that it made sense. So you are now in the know more than our state legislature issues.
Almost certainly, yeah.
They switched the committee members.
These guys are awesome. I
So,
mean, they,
You could go there and teach a few.
If one did listen.
yeah. Thank you for letting us know.
Hey, you're welcome. Thank you. All right.
It's complicated.
Oh,
And
okay.
my client is Los Angeles,
Okay.
but they're the operating agent.
Okay.
So I represent everybody else. And Eric represents IPA, the entity itself. But we're a tag team.
Yes.
Sweet, you guys.
Okay, nice to meet you. Thank you.
Pam, can I ask you, is this a Republican Democrat issue? Is it a coal country versus, is it a rural city issue? So you talk about using our voice, right? We have 7 legislators, 6 of them are Democrats, one's a Republican who represents such a small portion of Murray that it's fairly insignificant. So I'm just trying from a political
Sure.
perspective, what is our best way? I mean, we can go to our 6 Democrats who represent us in the House and the Senate, and they'll probably support us. They always are very supportive. But if it's a Republican versus a Democrat issue, then we find that often we're behind the 8 ball
Sure.
because we don't have as big of a voice up there. So I'm just trying to understand politically,
Yeah.
how is this shaking out?
I'll give you my sense of it but I'm not a lobbyist, but I'll give you my sense of it, and we talk to lobbyists all the time. I think last year it could have broken down, it did break down on party lines. The impetus for it is coming from a handful of Republican legislators from coal counties. And I think that the Republican caucus was fine to go along with them. I think that the success that I think we've had this year is scratching the surface of the claims a little bit and helping legislators on the Wasatch Front, Republicans and Democrats, realize that it's not so simple, that it could be very costly. And so maybe what you're seeing now is a bit of a split in the Republican caucus where you still got a handful of legislators who are still very concerned, understandably, about the coal industry and the jobs. But then Wasatch Front Republican legislators who are worried about the costs and whether this makes any sense. My 2 cents, I think too often people think, well, what's the point of getting a Democratic legislator involved? They're gonna get outvoted anyway. But I think every legislator matters. And especially when you see all this misinformation and misunderstanding, people not knowing the difference between IPA and IPP, whether it's Nate Bluen or somebody else, just if they're armed with information, even if their Republican colleagues don't want to vote with them, or at least they're armed with information. So anyway, I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know, one of our representatives is on the committee now.
Okay.
And it's not Nate anymore, so we do have one representative on the committee, so.
Both our lobbyists also were aware of this, both David Stewart and Corey Holdaway, and I think David has been involved.
Dave has gotten involved, yeah.
As well, so.
So, and she's equipped herself with information, I do know that, but.
It-
But yeah,
yeah.
but it shifts. I
Yeah.
mean, and I know that they do lobby really hard for Murray and they have information. So they work with Corey very well.
Alrighty, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, our next discussion item is the Community and Economic Development Department report by Bill Markle. Good afternoon, Phil.
That's all I need to do is just plug in.
In three. Yeah.
There's cameras backing you up, this is case. But here's camera here.
Mayor, I wonder if we should get some of these legislators. I wonder if we should get some of these legislators here so we can have
There we
to
go.
talk to
I got
them.
Thank you.
Yep.
Sleep, they can still have to leave.
They can sleep later.
Oh,
Thank you.
Yeah,
45 days.
yeah. Yes,
Oh, that's okay.
I'm going,
You're
I'm watching your finger.
on every page, so I'm here all night.
Give us a summary of all of it.
This is your annual review of community and economic development.
Very pretty picture,
Thank you.
especially with the clouds.
I
Zach
know.
took that a couple of weeks ago.
Very pretty with the
Good job,
clouds.
Zach.
Nice day. Our department, the Community and Economic Development Department, is charged with overseeing orderly growth and development of Murray City and to enhance the welfare of the citizens in the community by providing planning and economic development efforts which contribute to the enhancement of property. So we are comprised of building services, business license, code enforcement, economic development, planning and zoning, and we also support the redevelopment agency. So, and there's the old guy that sits in the corner office. My duties are to develop, direct, and coordinate the Community and Economic Development Department, prepare and manage annual budgets, engage in strategic short-term and long-term planning of department goals, assist in policy development, research specific information upon request, and aid in decision-making processes, planning, coordinating, and directing the implementation of the city general plan, small area plans, and code changes with elected and appointed officials, and provide support to the executive director of the redevelopment agency of Murray, which is the mayor. And all of those things that I do there are in a large part dependent on a wonderful staff. I can't do what I just read you on my own. There is no way. And I've got a wonderful staff that makes all of that possible. And so here they are. Rebecca Adamson is the administrative person. She keeps me on task. She processes all of our invoices, monitors budget and inputs budget, ensures that we have what we need to accomplish our work, prepares the monthly and annual reports, coordinates department events and projects, and file storage and organization. She assists me with departmental communication, calendar management, and research. She also is basically responsible for the MTAP program. She has taken that bull by the horns and she steers that thing. And right now we have 75 people in that program.
That's awesome.
And we actually have currently suspended taking new people right now. We've run into a few problems with the cards we have. They're not as foolproof as we thought they were. So Rebecca monitors these things every day, and she is kicking people off and calling them on the carpet, you know, if they buy something improper or that. And so we are told there's a better card, a more restrictive card that we'll be able to use. And we anticipate being able to do that in February. That will cut down some of the cheating.
Bill, what does MTAP?
It's the Murray Transportation Assistance Program.
Thank you.
Or somebody else would call it municipal, but I call it the Murray. And Rebecca also does all of she prepares all the minutes for Planning Commission, Hearing Officer, and RDA. And some of those, as you know, can be extremely bulky and take a lot of time. Elvon Farrell is our newest member of our staff, and he is responsible for all of our economic development initiatives. He supports local Murray business with expansion and finding resources, promotes economic growth through new development opportunities and business attraction, builds relationships at a regional and state level with government agencies, partnering organizations, real estate professionals, and developers. And Elvon comes to us from, is it GOED? Was that what it was called when you were there, or the governor's?
EDC Utah.
EDC Utah.
And
So he comes to us with a wealth of knowledge and connections, and we are very, very happy to have that. In addition to Elvon himself, he's a great addition to the department. He creates a variety of reports, policies, presentations, and marketing materials to accomplish economic development. At the conclusion of my presentation, I have asked Elvon if he'd take just 5 minutes and show you his latest project that he has been working on in conjunction with Mustafa
El Janabi, who is a planner one in our department. He's our young junior planner, you might want to say. He's been out of college for a couple of years, and these two have been working on a fascinating map that I'd like you guys to see. Next, our building department, and there is our building department right there. So the building official, Don Stephenson, is on the right. Our inspectors, Thomas Butt, the big guy in back, Butts, and Scott Sanderson in the middle. Carrie Burgess is on the right in the front. She is our permit tech. And our two office administrators, Miranda Carter and a new employee, Julie Devens. And Julie's been a great addition as well to the department. And just as a snapshot, building permits are up 33% from 2022. Total value of permits collected was $2.1 million, and that's up 34% from 2022. So even though construction has slowed somewhat in volume, the type of construction that we're having has been substantial. These apartments and larger buildings and that, they have really contributed to our revenues. And over 8,800, almost 8,900 inspections were performed by these two guys, and we do utilize a contract inspector when necessary because we're unable to fill 2 vacant building inspector positions. And we have tried and tried and tried. We even offered the guy that comes in that we contract with. And I don't know why he wouldn't want to work for a city and get retirement benefits and better insurance, but they like their flexibility, they like moving around, and it's a very difficult position to fill. So we're real grateful for the job these guys do. Yeah, they do. Our business license is dependent on 2 people. Priscilla is the business license specialist, and her office administrator is Delia Hernandez. Delia is not only involved with the business licensing, she is the go-to person in City Hall for translation services. She's amazing. And
She's the one that
she was employee of the month in December, I believe.
Yep,
Yes.
she's getting paid for those services.
Lovely lady, yeah. And so we have 3,788 active business licenses, and the total annual revenue was $821,000. There were 560 new business licenses for 2023, and the division received an 82% rating for customer satisfaction from local businesses. So, that's something to be very proud of.
Have you guys measured that before?
No, I believe that was on your survey, wasn't it, Elvon, that you?
Business survey that we
Yeah.
just
The business
did. That was
survey.
our typical one.
Right. Code enforcement.
that needs
And
to go
This is
to
amazing. Mark Warren, he is our code enforcement guy. Now, he does work with 2 individuals from the police department, but Mark handles the zoning and code complaints that are not criminal. And so there, as you can see, there are a lot. 264 zoning and code complaints, 566 license renewal inspections that he goes out and makes sure that they are complying with the rules and regs in their CUPs and so forth. So 132 final inspections for occupancy and 331 open cases, and 220 of those were closed. And that's really quite remarkable. Mark, he works independently. I don't have to worry about him. He's there early in the morning, and he cranks these things out. And really, as far as I know, he's not the most hated guy in the city, which is amazing. When you're out there doing enforcement, it takes a special person to be able to tell somebody that you've got to do this differently, or you're in violation, or we're going to fine you, or we're going to shut you down. He does it well. The planning division, 3 individuals. Zach Smallwood is the division manager. Susan Nixon, our senior planner, and there's Mustafa in and their duties include obviously processing applications. They do staff reviews, administrative reviews. They are the legislative portion. They process all of that for our planning commission. And quasi-judicial, they have to prepare reports for the hearing officer, and we've had a couple of those this year. They meet with developers and residents to answer questions related to land use, and they create and manage the general plan and land use ordinances. And it's a huge job. You really can't imagine the volume of requests and questions and projects that they handle, and they do a remarkable job. So
Plus they meet with city council people.
they do.
And answer their very long
They help.
conversations on the telephone.
And that's their
So
job.
I
And,
know,
you know,
and I appreciate that.
it's quite a remarkable department.
Yeah,
I'm very lucky to be involved with these people.
Yeah.
So, and that is it.
and then can you mention where Elvon is part of the chamber?
Sure. Elvon is working with the Chamber of Commerce. That's one of the areas where he's building relationships.
Yeah.
He meets independently with developers to try and establish relationships. When you never know when the opportunity is going to arise, and we want those important people to think of Murray and to think of Elvon. If they see something and they go, oh, something's available in Murray or something's happening in Murray. Oh, I've got this guy's number. I'll just call him and find out.
Yeah.
And that's really what we need. It's a large part of his initial speeding, not speeding up, but his learning mode into the job is to build these relationships, because that's really what's crucial. Big money like that is a relationship business.
Yeah. And the chamber needs to know also that we're here, the council's here to support the chamber in their ribbon cutting, their
Sure.
fundraisers, whatever they have going on. We're still here. It's just, it fits
Absolutely.
better with your department.
Absolutely. And
That's-
Elvon is also our representative on NeighborWorks as well from the department. He sits on their board of directors. And,
That's
and I
awesome.
believe
Is there
that
anything-
crucial too.
From NeighborWorks that we should know about, or any updates there?
Well, in RDA today, I
Oh,
was,
yeah, okay.
but that's fine. We are negotiating a new, building a new contract with them. Our current contract's expired. So we're just working with them to come up with a new contract. We don't anticipate a lot of changes, but, we'll have some number of weekers for you on loans and so forth that they've done. It's a great relationship. We really value NeighborWorks. I don't know what we would do. As a staff, we couldn't do the job they're doing. I can tell you that right now. So we're very fortunate to have that partnership. Well, with that, I'd like, if it's okay, to have
Sure.
Elvon come up and
Yes,
show you a
come.
project he's working on.
Come right ahead.
His latest exciting thing.
You can stay
Let me
here.
pull it up on your laptop. Yeah. So you need to go to, oh yeah, it's on my home screen. So,
Great. Like Phil mentioned, even though Mustafa isn't here, I'd like to definitely highlight his work on this project that we've been doing. He's put in a lot of great effort and work on it.
let's see. See, when it comes to my laptop. Project.
Okay, so this is something that I've
It's not up there.
seen.
Okay.
We don't have it up.
I can see it, so that's
Let's turn it around.
So this is an online tool that we've been putting together. I've seen this be really successful at another city that I've worked with. A lot of times residents or business owners or real estate professionals, developers end up seeing Murray there. Maybe they see some dirt being disturbed near them and they have a question of what's happening at that location. So this is the Murray City Projects map. It's our attempt to help answer those questions. So from this map, a resident or a real estate professional will be able to go to the area that they're looking at. Maybe they're wondering what's happening around 5300, 700 West. and they'll be able to then click on this. They'll be able to see information about only what's public information that's gone through Planning Commission and things like that. So it won't have early on discussions that haven't yet gone through a public meeting. But then they'll be able to actually see what's happening here. We'll keep these on for a little bit while, even after they're complete. So if we click over here, you'll still be able to see, oh, okay, so what was happening was a remodel of a new commercial business, which is High Point Coffee over here. So basically the idea here is to make sure that we're giving some basic information, informing the public and future developers about what's developing, what's happening around Murray City.
What's the hammer?
The hammer right now, that's municipal projects. So you can, if someone's at the park and wondering what's happening over here, it's the Murray Armory renovation. You can see there's areas here, Old City Hall, or the Murray Tower development, information about that. You can get information here about the Murray Theater renovation.
Where's this found?
So we're launching this now, and we're gonna start sharing this around. We'll send you all a link. You can save it so that
Not
you
live
can-
yet.
It's not, well,
I know it's in a test mode live, so.
yeah, so, but we'll be sharing this around so that people can start to see it. This is something that I'm gonna be keeping as, a bookmarked page that we can refer to. It will be updated.
Is it a layer in Google Maps? Is that what it is?
Yeah, but it will be its own map, so you can just pull it up.
Because Google won't tell you all this stuff, just what you put on there for ours.
Exactly, yeah, so it's its own map.
You can't sell Christmas lights, they add a layer and you can add to your own map.
So it's not a layer that you can add to your own map,
Okay.
but it is something that you can do with all of these projects
like it.
getting around here. And I'm sure you often get questions from residents saying, hey, what's happening here? And this is an easy tool that you can pull up.
So just for fun, go to Winchester, 64 South and 9th East for the RC Willie site.
Yeah.
Just for fun.
Well, because really, this is gonna be handy. When you show us this, look at that.
So you can see there's townhomes, number of unit, the current zoning, land type.
So we don't get to call you anymore.
You can put the mayor's phone number.
Yeah. Well, definitely,
555.
right. And we definitely don't want people to just stop calling us necessarily. It's now they're able to answer these basic questions about this, and then have more informed questions afterwards.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping. There he is. Wouldn't that be cool?
So yes, we'll share this around with you, and yeah, hopefully we'll get as many people using it as possible. That's our goal.
That'd be great.
Any other questions?
No, thank you for all you guys do.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, you get, like, you get tired of seeing this.
How are you liking it, Phil? You haven't given us a summation
still
of
here.
your.
No, I do what, I really do enjoy it, and to be honest with you, the only reason that I enjoy it is the people I work with. You know, I get a lot of support from administration, personally, and I get a lot of support from my department. And you can't ask for more than that. And if I don't like that, then get my butt out of here.
Well, I'm glad.
Can you believe 4 more years? I can't
I
believe it.
appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Phil.
Phil.
Okay, so we're on number 3, discussion on an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2024 budget. Is presenting.
You got 5 minutes to read it.
So, okay, fine.
Well, I have 15, right?
Yep.
I'll take 5.
So fast.
Well, I don't know if you want me to read the whole memo, but the big gist of this is the second probably 4 budget amendments we will do throughout the year. The couple of things that are the very important ones that I wanted to make sure I got to, in case I decide not, or we decide we don't need any more budget amendments, which could happen, not likely, but it could happen. That the language in this ordinance allows me to adjust the budget for transfers of the point of the transportation sales tax that I need to transfer to CIP so we can use it next year. Even actually this year. If it comes in over budget, I'm gonna have to transfer more than what we budgeted. And I would like to be able to adjust the transfer in and out budgets for that. So this language allows me to do that. And as a separate thing, it also allows me to make sure that we keep our reserves between 25 and 26% of our revenue that came in, and adjust the budgets to make sure that I don't get written up for transferring too much money out of the general fund. That money will get generated by, if sales tax remains even with last year, it will be higher than what I'm getting. So if you keep seeing where we're getting sales taxes 0.5% or 0.5% below last year, or it's right on what we collected last year, that is higher than what I budgeted. I figured we'd be in a recession by now. Fancy that, it's not happening, good thing. We will have money for capital projects. So, and then, of course, all of your departments do not spend every dollar that they are allocated, and that will end up over there. Other things that are in here, we've got the police department, JAG grant that we received for $33,916. We got $110,000 from ZAP, and I had only budgeted $100,000, so I'm increasing the budget $10,000.
And I'm very excited to see that they're going to extend
They
it.
had asked me that they needed some additional funds so they could extend the season into September. You're saying, so why do we need to increase this year's budget? They gotta make the down payments on whatever concert says they want. It's always half upfront and then half of when the concert actually takes place.
In case we don't like the concert, then we don't pay it.
Do you think that came out from the committee that you're,
The fire department got an EMPG grant, so I'm budgeting that. And by the way, we can receive all of this money without your approval, we just can't spend any of it. So we're asking to spend it, but, we received, $15,945 state alcohol funds than I had estimated. People are drinking a lot in Utah, actually, there's something happening with population. We just have more population, so they are, I mean, as a percentage, I bet you it's the same percentage of people that drink.
Yeah.
It's just, there are just more of us.
Yep.
Bill came back to work.
He doesn't, he's too
More
young to
disposable
remember.
income now.
He's too young to remember, but Bill remembers when we could drink at lunchtime. I didn't drink.
I comment about that.
In the 80s, I think that'd take people to places to get a drink for.
That's been wiped from my memory.
We went out on 3 wildland fire deployments. Received a bunch of money from those. The original thing, I said I'm saying it wasn't money for the small equipment. We're actually, Joey decided that he wanted to send $20,819 for small equipment and send $22,000 over to CIP for future equipment, because going out on these fires does use our machines a little bit more than they would be, and they might break down sooner, so they start saving some of this money to replace. So I will change the next memo, you will see that it adjusts just a little bit for that, to send money to the CIP and to have CIP receive it and put it in his budget for future saving. We are increasing our budget revenue to cover some things that came up through the course of the first 6 months of the year. The homeless camp cleanup, get some professionals in there when we have to move homeless camps to get those cleaned up. $50,000 is an estimate. We have no idea what it's gonna cost. Streets will monitor and maintain that budget. An additional 34,000 for that September concerts. You guys approved $73,600 more of the 501c3 donations than we had budgeted. I had done a lot of the budgeting of the standard ones, but some people asked for more money, so from there. And then ComDev, the building division, needs some new building permit and inspection software that's a little more up to date.
Hey,
and
Brenda,
will work
that-
a little better.
Can I say, letter C, that came out of the revenue budget, the 73,600, did that come out of the revenue budget?
Yeah, it's coming, I'm increasing the interest for all of those A, B, C, and D
Okay,
under number 6.
okay,
And we have already met the budget for interest in the general fund. So within about 2 months, we'll probably meet this 221,000, 2 more months. 3 at the most.
So just to ask, we're accepting these, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then are you amending the existing code? Or is this just in summation of the?
There is I'm amending the budget, but, so I'm increasing the revenue to offset these additional expenses. For 6, A, B, C, and D.
Okay. So an item, I guess I'm just trying to understand, are we amending the existing code already as it is?
We're amending the existing budget code, yeah,
The existing budget code to
to add these
all
amounts.
these?
Not the city code.
Okay, I heard you say amending. Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Budget ordinance.
Okay,
It's
so
not
this is just regular, what we do,
4 times a year.
yeah, pretty much at every quarter, right?
But
Yeah,
pretty much.
okay, thank you.
So ComDev's getting new software. It actually, I think, will be better. They're promising me it will be better for both the inspectors and the contractors that are using our services. The library fund got a hotspot grant. This will be the last one. It is using ARPA funds, and ARPA funds had to all be spent by this fall. So next year we'll probably have to, if we want to keep the hotspots going, it'll have to come out of their budget, but I think that's a service that everybody likes because they're always gone.
Yeah.
So we may have to continue that. It's up to the library. In the CIP fund, the park center, and I don't know what piece of equipment this was.
Yeah.
Had a damaged piece of equipment. We got reimbursed this year for it. They probably replaced it last year. And in order for them to replace and use and get another piece of equipment, we needed to put this in the budget. And then they can spend it on whatever piece of equipment they deem necessary. The park storage building is running to, you dig a hole in Murray, you're gonna find something.
Water.
You're either gonna find water,
Eureka!
I hear this was bricks and previous foundations and all kinds of stuff. So,
okay, I'm gonna be really stupid probably on this. Where's the park storage building? Where's,
It's right behind Kim's, so it's brand new,
okay.
and right behind where Kim's office is.
What, you're, oh,
Water Woods.
really, that ran into water?
Can you, there.
they made all kinds of
Everything
stuff.
go on it, though.
That's right, it was being built during the
course.
Haunted Woods.
Same
Now I
thing
know where
with
it's at.
over the-
Yes,
They're doing that so that they can't, because they no longer can store stuff in the armory.
right.
So it's
Got
kind
it,
of-
yes.
The
And
very
I remember that.
is currently being subject to the weather and
Yes.
it's stored over where the I
Supposed to be done, I wonder if the end of this month, is that correct, or?
Yeah, it should be done by the end of this month. They can get their equipment out of the weather.
Are we gonna have a ribbon cutting ceremony?
No. So they have got
Good light.
more costs associated with it. He promises me he can do it for the additional 85,000 and actually a little bit less, but I bumped it up just so that I don't have to come back. And that will come from, all of these will come, that one will come from interest revenue. The CIP fund is earning interest, just like the general fund, and so that's coming from interest revenue. And then, when we prepared the budget, a few of us missed this, that we had moved the Public Works building into 2025. They need the budget in 2024. So we are putting this back in the budget so that they can pay their portion, the streets people can pay their portion. And to do that, I'm gonna use revenue that the RDA is gonna send to the CIP fund as they repay the loan that they owe the general fund for creating this thing called, I think it's Cottonwood Street, or where the hospital is. That nice 4-lane street behind the hospital.
Oh, yeah.
And the bridge and all of that stuff. Because that used to be a little 2-lane road, I'm told.
Yes.
But they still owe us money for that, and so that's gonna go over to the CIP fund. The water fund, UDOT's estimate on their bearing of the 300 West water line, under 215.
Oh, yeah, got it.
Was off by about a third, and so we're gonna raise that budget so we don't have to use our own budget to do that. And then we do have some stuff going on at mitigation at McGee Springs, so we're gonna increase their budget so they can get that and get the iron level taken care of and the pumping performance taken care of. And so that will be paid for by interest that they're earning on their funds. Everybody, I budgeted interest low. I didn't think the interest rates were gonna stay at 5%. I thought they might start dropping, but they're not. We're up anywhere between 4.9 and 5 and over 5, depending on where the money is invested. And then solid waste has 2 total employees. One of them has announced their retirement. He has been here a long time and has 320 hours of vacation. He's got a really good retirement payout set. So their budget can't handle a $19,000 payout. So I'm just increasing the budget and using interest that they've earned to offset that. We don't want to leave that open while that payout gets paid for. There are some times when you can do that if you've got a big department, but when you've got a division department, you can't do it. Any questions?
No, I'm good. I'm good. Are you? Are you? Questions?
Nice to have dividends coming in, I'll tell you that.
Interest.
What, 0 point?
We were at 0.5. We've been as low as 0.2. But now we are at 5, and I just did a little thing for the annual report. In 2020 calendar, 2021, we earned citywide, and granted we had less cash then, but we earned $173,000 in citywide. In 2022, we earned 2 million something, it started up. Wow. 2023, $5 million.
Whoa!
Where all that money, you're honestly, still to help the, what do you call it, the nonprofits.
Yeah.
Because you have so much.
Yeah. So, and it's continuing that way right now. So
But it's the residents' money still.
Yeah.
it is.
That old stuff.
But that also helps with like paying our bonds.
Oh.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
it's going through, we're gonna be able to do, you can do a few more capital projects, you can do some more streets, because, CIP fund is earning money.
How do we compare to other cities and interest earned?
We're probably about the same, everybody's invested in the same thing. They're either in the PTIP, which everybody gets the same. They have whatever bank they're in that does general stuff. And then they're in an asset manager, either Morton, I think there's 3 of them. And the reason you get into an asset manager is the PTIP climbs really fast. But man, if we get in a recession, it dives faster, you know, even faster than it climbs.
Yeah.
It's just, but Morton, they buy stuff that's 1 and 2 years out. So it's gonna take a while, it takes longer for Morton to come up, but it also takes a lot longer for our Morton assets to go down.
Okay.
So that's why
So
we
we can
invest part of
prepare,
our money
yeah.
there. Yeah, just to kind of
Thank
spread it out.
Thanks, Brenda. Yes, please.
And you've heard the annual report mentioned a couple of times tonight. The annual report is something that is required in city code where the mayor is required to submit an annual report to the city council. So departments, the way that works is departments submit their annual reports. I compile it. Brad approves it, and then we send you a copy of it, probably around the end of the month.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, we are on to number 4. Our last one for today is discussion on an ordinance amending section 17.152.020 and 17.152.030 in the M-G zoning district to allow land use number 6600 contract construction service as a permitted use instead of a conditional use, and Zachary Smallwood will be presenting.
Yeah. So, hello everyone. So, this request is a staff generated request. It's something I've been wanting to work on for years. So, our MG zone, which is our manufacturing zone, it's our heaviest area, probably like industrial. It's the gray one. It's all highlighted in yellow around the thing. So it's pretty much the northwestern side and then right through kind of the middle between the railroad and I-15. So that's kind of our heavy industrial areas for the city. And right now, contractors, that's what that 6600 stands for. So any type of contractor is a conditional use, which means that you have to submit all your plans, floor plans, site plan, all that fun stuff, and go to the planning commission for review. You pay the application fee, all that fun stuff. However, in many of the other zones in the city, including in your own home, you can actually be a contractor and not have to go through that process. So in the CD zone, you can be a contractor. Like I said, in all the residential zones, it's a major home occupation. So you have to get neighbor signatures, but you don't have to go to the planning commission for it. So I've always thought it funny that in our heavy industrial areas, that it's a conditional use. It doesn't have any greater impact than any other industrial use in that area. So we came to the conclusion that we think it should be a permitted use. The example I gave, if you read the minutes and packet, is the wood manufacturing type thing. They can build their cabinets, but they can't actually go out and install them without coming to the planning commission. So, which is just silly in my.
But why do you think it was that way to begin with?
So
What was the reasoning behind it?
So-
Any idea?
our code was developed probably 80s. This latest round of really heavy looking at uses specifically, and land use applications were treated very differently. Even 20 years ago, you could impose a lot more subjectivity on an application. So if you didn't like something, the planning commission could say, "We don't like this here. We don't think it's a good idea. Go away."
We don't want it.
Yeah. Where now, through changes to the legislature and things like that, land use applications are, especially conditional use permits, are, if you meet the ordinance, then you're approved. So really, this is just taking out that extra step, where before you had subjectivity and you really don't have that subjectivity.
Are they subjected anywhere else? No, right?
I'm sorry.
Are they subjected anywhere else in the other zones?
Like conditional? Are they conditional anywhere else? Not. I'm sure they are, but I don't know where off the top of my head. I know some of them, they're limited to like GO zone, like our general office. They're limited to just an office only, so they can't store their materials on site, they can't store their vehicles on site. But if they're just running an office, they can operate there. There's a mix of kind of how
So
that
can
works.
they store their materials on these sites?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Cause this is also subjected to the area of like future growth too, correct?
Yeah, there are areas that could be potential for growth. A lot of it in our future land use map calls for this going more to like business park or more office related uses. Again, the general plan was done in 2017, so office has changed significantly over the past 4 years.
Yeah.
So we'll have to reevaluate that and see kind of where that goes. MG is it's not bad to have your MG zone for sure. Your manufacturing zones, you need that kind of industrial, those industrial areas. Questions? Did that answer the kind of the question in general? Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you had looked at consequences.
Yeah, and that was, I know that was a concern of the commission. A lot of these uses are kind of a way where it was just so much more subjective.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It says that multiple businesses have relocated because of this.
yeah, there have been.
Estimate, how many are you talking about?
I get calls, the department gets calls, probably a dozen a week, just asking, hey, can we relocate our business? It's not always a no, but it's always, and it's not always that, but we get at least a dozen calls a week. Some people asking to relocate their business, and then we kind of go through what that process takes. So.
I'm not saying we shouldn't do this, but I'm thinking about like what could happen potentially with even the new bill that we're looking at, or the code that we're looking to change, even from the new bill, the Senate bill. What is the one that we're voting on tonight?
Oh, the subdivision?
Mm-hmm.
That one,
Also not the subdivision, but with future plans along transportation and what that will look like.
Yeah.
If we have a construction yard along this roadway and not opportunities to grow.
Yeah, and there
But it
will
can limit
still
that.
be, there will still be opportunities. In the past, in 2000, some other time, sometime early 2000s, the city actually rezoned this whole area, the MCMU. This all was in that manufacturing zone, and we rezoned it. So what happens when a city does that is they become non-conforming uses, meaning they can stay and operate because they were legally able to before the change. If they want to significantly change the site, or if that business leaves and they want to redevelop it, then that non-conformity goes away. So there would be something like that, and the zoning ordinance is very different than like a future land use map. They don't dictate the same things.
Okay.
So, the planning commission voted 6-0 to recommend approval. So we're asking for the same. Any other questions?
If you get bored, you should read the permitted uses and the conditional uses.
Hey.
Holy moly.
If you get really bored, you can see where that book comes from. The book that list is in. So, yeah.
I was like going, here, wonder what that is. No clue. Anyways.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it looks like we are on time, Jennifer. So if there is no other business, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. 5:30. Yep. And thank you.